Slinky is the most unlikely toy, entangled in a tale of steps, missteps, and one woman's steely optimism. And if you think the odds of a metal spring selling over 1/3 billion copies is low, wait till you hear what she had to endure to make it so. This is the tale of a toy everyone knows as Slinky. In 2006, I produced the film Toyland with director Ken Sons. We traveled to Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania to the home of Slinky and to the home of the toy's matriarch, Betty James. She was just as fun and endearing as the toy she helped make famous.
Well, my earliest memory of Slinky was my husband coming home from work and had this thing in his hand, and he said, "I think I can make this walk." My husband was a mechanical engineer and marine engineer, and he was out on the trial run of a naval ship for the cramped shipyard. And the spring fell off a table and gave him the idea that he might be able to make it walk. And when he finally got the properties and everything right, we brought Tom in, who was just a little foal at that time. And then my husband said, "Let's try putting down the stairs." And I was speechless. So then we brought in neighborhood children to see if they liked it. And everybody seemed to like it.
Life can feel serene, and then a single rock breaks the surface.
My husband said, "We have a toy now. You have to name it." I didn't know how or what I would call it, so I thought, well, I'll get a dictionary and see if I can find anything that sort of depicted what this does. And the word Slinky was it. We were both just out of college, and we didn't have any money, and we had a little boy. We borrowed $500. We had made what we could get for that price. 400 seemed to be about the limit. The 400 were made by the company that was rolling them for us. We didn't have the equipment at that time.
That it's not working, it's not going to work. It doesn't matter how much you try, how long you stay. If it's not going to work, it's not going to work.
She said, "Well, I went to visit home and it feels so good."
Yeah.
She said, "But don't."
That company was the Wilkening Manufacturing Company in South Philadelphia, a maker of piston rings. Journalist Clark DeLeon discovered that before Slinky was invented, the employees at Wilkening were already playing with springs because a coil of uncut piston rings acted just like a Slinky. This toy lore is reminiscent of Frisbee pie workers tossing metal pie tins before the Frisbee was invented. Slinky's success brought competitors. A company in Chicago started selling Mr. Walker in December of 1946, but it was too late. Richard James had already filed his patent in August of that year. Perhaps to deter others, James Industries allowed Wilkening to produce their own spring toys, Coralie and Mr. Wiggle, as long as they paid a royalty and printed the James patent number on their box. Richard and Betty lost money on those first 400 Slinkies because they sold them for $1, just to see if anyone even wanted a walking spring. They couldn't even afford a box. Each one was hand-wrapped with yellow paper on which was printed instructions on how to play. Betty's father's model shop on Portico Street was the couple's first Slinky factory.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a factory. That was our first home. A lot of people thought we were crazy. In fact, sometimes I even wondered myself.
I remember the house in Brookline where Slinky started to get big. I must have been 4 or 5.
We used home as a model because at that point we couldn't afford models. And we wanted to have something we could show the stores. When we first had Slinky, we would go out and try to show people. But you know, a Slinky just sitting there isn't terribly exciting because you don't know what it does. So we tried and they said no, they weren't interested. Well, finally, Mr. Urban at Gimbel's in Philadelphia took pity on us, and he said, well, I'll give you the end of a counter in November, and you can come down and see what you can do. My husband took them down, and I thought, oh, you know, if he doesn't sell any, he's going to feel so sad. So I called a friend of mine, and I said, if I give you $1, will you go with me and buy a Slinky? So that if no one else is buying, at least it'll look like he has customers. We got down there and got off the elevator. There were all these people waving dollar bills. I mean, we sold 400 in 90 minutes.
After Slinky's debut at Gimbel's, The store returned the favor in the spring of 1946, advertising Slinky as a riot at parties. No wonder it swept New York like wildfire. And Slinky kept stretching beyond Philadelphia, showing up in department stores like Jordan Marsh in Boston, Blocks in Indianapolis, and Mays in Los Angeles. Richard and Betty also sold thousands of Slinkies direct to consumers through ads like these. How could James Industries go from having 400 Slinkies made for them to mass producing their own in less than a year? Richard James was a born engineer.
Now that thing though, because like the thing is that the husband was divorced before too,
He didn't
right?
care about his other daughter, right?
That's the thing.
Because he has another daughter and he didn't
Yeah,
care
and he
about
was
her.
divorced before. Yeah, like,
Ouch.
like talk to the
That's
ex
going to be a
and
month.
ask the ex if it was the same thing he was going through. Like the ex left him to get married.
I'm just gonna go buy it. Anything we bought a cleaner now for good?
He made the first machine at the end of 1945. The wire comes in round, and it has some oil residue on it, and it goes in this bath, and there is a solution in the water to help take that off and cool it. Then it goes up and is flattened after that process, and then rolled on the reel, and then automatically cut off, and then the girls would crimp it on the ends for safety. Then it was put on the assembly line and would go down the line to the end. Slinky now has graduated to walking right off the assembly line into a box and then would be put in the master carton and taken to shipping. You know, when we started out in Portico Street in the little old building, we outgrew it. And we had to build a factory, so we got some land in Clifton Heights, which is a suburb of Philly, and we built our first factory there. And pretty soon we outgrew that. So then we decided, well, we had to build a larger one. And we built one out in Paoli, which is another suburb of Philly. We got round wire, and it was brought in huge barrels. And one day there was a steel strike, and we had orders, and I didn't know what we were going to do because we really needed it. So I thought, no, I'll call the president of Pittsburgh Steel. And I told him that our condition and what had happened, and I said, I know you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't have empathy for other people. And I said, could you help me? And the next couple days we got steel.
As Slinky's popularity grew, Richard had to build 5 more machines to keep up with demand. Just 10 years from its humble introduction, over 100 million Slinkies were sold. Yet not everything the company touched turned to gold. Richard and Betty had more than their share of flops, and dealing with outside inventors started out for James Industries as a very cautionary tale.
Oh, Marvin Glass, the inventor, came to our house in Philly, and he had a beanie, and he had a Slinky over the top. And we paid him, quite a sum for it. I think it was, at that time, $5,000, which sounded enormous to us. That was something that didn't go over. And then we had a man come in one day, and he had these glasses, a Mr. Clark, and it was the silliest thing. I loved them.
Then in 1952, a tiny dog came to James Industries. He was just a little yellow fellow, but he sure had a lot of pull.
Yeah.